The pristine white halls of Stellar Labs hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with its fusion reactors. Dr. Elena Santos stood before her holographic display, dark eyes fixed on the swirling strands of alien DNA that rotated slowly in the air before her. 10 years of xenobiological research, and she'd never seen anything like this. The luminary genetic structure didn't just defy human understanding, it seemed to defy the laws of physics themselves. Dr. Santos, the luminary delegation has arrived. Her assistant's voice crackled through the lab's comm system, sending a jolt of anticipation through her spine. After months of remote data exchange, the luminary had finally agreed to in-person collaboration. This wasn't just first contact, this was first scientific contact. Elena smoothed her lab coat, checking her reflection in the polished surface of a nearby console. Her copper-toned skin looked paler than usual under the lab's harsh lighting, and she tucked a stray curl of black hair behind her ear. First impressions mattered, especially when dealing with a species that could potentially revolutionize human understanding of genetics. The lab doors whispered open, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Ambassador Cathara of the Luminari moved like light through water, their bioluminescent skin casting subtle patterns across the white walls. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and brilliant gold, Cathara embodied everything beautiful and alien about their species. Dr. Santos, Cathara's voice resonated with harmonics impossible for human vocal cords to produce. Your research into our genetic structure is unprecedented. There was something in the way they said unprecedented that made Elena's scientific instincts tingle. Ambassador Cathara, welcome to Stellar Labs. Elena gestured to the holographic display. I hope you'll find our facilities adequate for our joint research initiative. She watched as Cathara's multifaceted eyes sullied the rotating DNA strands, their pupils dilating in what she hoped was interest rather than offense. You've mapped the 7th strand, Cathara observed, their luminescent patterns shifting to a deep blue. None of your previous researchers managed to detect it. They moved closer to the display, their tall frame casting dancing shadows across Elena's workstation. Perhaps there is more to human science than we initially believed. Elena felt a surge of pride, quickly tempered by professional restraint. The 7th strand only became visible when we modified our quantum microscopes to account for phase-shifted matter. Your genetic structure exists partially in what we would consider quantum space. It's fascinating. Cathara's head tilted at an angle that would have been impossible for human vertebrae. Fascinating, perhaps. Sacred, certainly. Our genetic structure is a gift from the cosmic harmonies, Dr. Santos. It is not merely a sequence of biological instructions. Science and the sacred aren't mutually exclusive, Ambassador. Elena responded carefully. Understanding the mechanics of something beautiful doesn't make it any less magnificent. She gestured to another display, bringing up a comparison between human and luminary DNA. Look here, the way your 7th strand interacts with what we would consider junk DNA in human genetics. It's like us speaking the same language, just in different dialects. Cathara's bioluminescence pulsed with what Elena had learned to recognize as surprise. You believe our species are compatible. The harmonics in their voice shifted to a higher register. Theoretically, at a fundamental level, yes. Elena brought up another simulation. Your DNA doesn't just exist in quantum space, it seems to reach out to other genetic materials, attempting to harmonize with them. It's unlike anything we've ever seen in terrestrial genetics. The ambassador's scales rippled with colors Elena had never seen them display before. This could be problematic, Thara said, but their tone suggested fascination rather than concern. Our Council of Elders has strict protocols regarding genetic interaction with other species. With all due respect, Ambassador, Elena replied, feeling suddenly bold. If your council didn't want to explore these possibilities, they wouldn't have sent you here. She met Cathara's multifaceted gaze steadily. You're not just an ambassador, You're one of your species' leading genetic architects. I've read your papers on quantum DNA manipulation. Cathara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Elena could only interpret as amusement. And you, Dr. Santos, are not just another human scientist. Your understanding of our genetic structure goes beyond mere academic interest. They moved closer, their tall frame looming over Elena's workstation. You see the possibilities, don't you? The potential for something new. Elena nodded, her heart racing with scientific excitement. If we could understand how your seventh strand communicates with human DNA, we could revolutionize medicine, solve genetic disorders, maybe even unlock new aspects of human evolution. But more than that, she paused, choosing her words carefully. We could bridge the gap between our species at the most fundamental level. Cathara's scales shimmered with a rainbow of colors. A dangerous proposition, Dr. Santos. Knowledge of genetic harmony has shattered civilizations before. They reached out with one elongated hand, manipulating the holographic display with graceful movements. But perhaps it is time for both our species to evolve beyond our limitations. As Elena watched Cathara interact with her research data, she felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. This was more than first contact. This was the beginning of something unprecedented in human history. And somehow, she knew her life would never be the same after this moment. Little did she know just how right she was. 3 months into the joint research project, Elena found herself spending more time watching Cathara than her data screens. The Luminary ambassador moved through the lab with an otherworldly grace, their bioluminescent patterns creating mesmerizing displays that seemed to shift with their thoughts. Today, they glowed with an intense azure that Elena had learned to associate with scientific breakthrough. The quantum resonance patterns are stabilizing, Cathara announced, their harmonics vibrating with excitement. Your modified containment field is actually working, Elena. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. They'd abandoned formal titles weeks ago, but every time Cathara spoke her name, it carried those impossible harmonics that made it sound like music. Elena moved to Cathara's workstation, careful not to brush against their scales, though lately she'd found herself wondering what they would feel like. The holographic display showed 2 DNA helixes dancing around each other, human and luminary genetic material performing an intricate quantum waltz. Look at the interface points. Elena pointed to where the strands intertwined. The 7th strand isn't just communicating with our DNA anymore, it's teaching it how to exist in quantum space. She couldn't keep the awe from her voice. This could change everything we know about genetic engineering. Cathara's scales rippled with colors that Elena had begun to interpret as enthusiasm mixed with concern. The Council of Elders would say we're breaking fundamental taboos, they said, but their hands continued to adjust the quantum field parameters. Genetic harmony is meant to be achieved through spiritual enlightenment, not laboratory manipulation. But what if they're the same thing? Elena found herself saying, what if this is just another path to the harmony your people speak of? She turned to face Cathara, struck again by how their height should have been intimidating, but instead felt oddly comforting. Science is humanity's way of understanding the sacred. Cathara's multifaceted eyes studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You are unlike any human I've encountered, Elena Santos. You see beyond the surface of things. Their bioluminescence shifted to a deep violet that she'd never seen before. Perhaps that is why the 7th strand responds so strongly to your presence. What do you mean? Elena's scientific curiosity piqued. The strand responds to me. Cathara manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a time-lapse of their experiments. Watch your DNA samples when you're in the lab versus when you're not. The quantum resonance patterns are significantly stronger in your presence. At first, I thought it was a measurement error, but they paused, their scales shimmering with uncertainty. It's as if your genetic material is reaching out, seeking harmony. Elena's mind raced with implications. Could it be related to my extended exposure to the quantum fields? Or maybe She trailed off as she noticed Cathara's bioluminescence pulsing in an unusual pattern. "What aren't you telling me?" "Among my people," Cathara began slowly, their harmonics dropping to a lower register, "there are legends of rare individuals whose genetic songs resonate across species. The harmonious ones, we call them. They were said to be the bridge between different forms of life. Their scales shifted through colors Elena had no names for. I believed they were merely stories until I saw your DNA dance with ours." Elena felt her face flush. "I'm not special, Cathara. I'm just a scientist trying to understand something beautiful." She gestured to the swirling DNA displays. "This is the real miracle, two species finding common ground at the molecular level." "Perhaps." Cathara moved closer, their tall frame casting iridescent shadows over Elena. "The miracle is that you can see the beauty in it at all. Most humans would see only data and potential applications. You see the harmony." Their words hung in the air between them, charged with something that went beyond scientific collaboration. Elena became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the subtle warmth radiating from Cathara's bioluminescent skin, of the way their scales seemed to shimmer in response to her proximity. A sudden alert from the quantum containment field broke the moment. Both of them turned to see the DNA strands executing an unexpected pattern, the seventh strand weaving through human genetic material in ways their simulations hadn't predicted. "That's impossible," Elena breathed, fingers flying over the controls. "The integration rate is off the charts. Cathara, are you seeing this?" But Cathara had gone completely still, their bioluminescence dimming to a soft glow. "Elena," they said, that a voice carrying harmonics she'd never heard before, "I believe we may have discovered something that neither of our species is prepared for." As they stood together, watching their genetic materials merge in ways that defied both science and sacred tradition, Elena felt the weight of discovery settling over them. They were standing on the brink of something revolutionary, something that could unite their species or tear them apart. And in that moment, studying Cathara's mesmerizing patterns of light and color, Elena realized she was no longer certain which outcome frightened her more. The midnight hours at Stellar Labs held a different kind of energy. With most of the staff gone, Elena found herself alone with Cathara more often, their research extending well beyond standard hours. Tonight, the lab's silence was broken only by the soft hum of quantum containment fields and the melodic harmonics of Cathara's voice. "The seventh strand is exhibiting unprecedented behavior," Cathara observed, their bioluminescence casting a soft glow over their workstation. "The integration patterns have evolved beyond our initial projections." They turned to Elena, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "Your presence continues to catalyze the reaction." Elena studied the data scrolling across her screen, trying to ignore the way Cathara's scales shimmed in response to her movements. "The quantum resonance is stronger than ever. Look at these harmonics. They're almost like..." She hesitated, searching for the right word. "A song," Cathara finished. "The DNA strands are singing to each other." Their tall frame moved closer, casting iridescent patterns across Elena's console. "In our oldest texts, there are references to the Great Harmony, a state where different forms of life could share genetic songs. Most consider it metaphorical, but this..." They gestured to the intertwining DNA strands. "This is literal harmony." Elena felt her pulse quicken as she watched the display. The human and luminary genetic material danced together in patterns that shouldn't have been possible, defying everything she thought she knew about molecular biology. "We should probably report this to the Oversight Committee," she said, but made no move toward the communication console. Cathara's scales rippled with what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. "The committee would shut down our research immediately. They're not ready to understand what's happening here." Their bioluminescence pulsed with deeper colors. "Are you?" "Understanding is what I do," Elena replied, turning to face them. "Even if what I'm understanding challenges everything I thought I knew." She reached out without thinking, her hand hovering near Cathara's luminescent skin. Your patterns, they're different tonight. Kythera remained perfectly still, their multifaceted eyes fixed on Elena's hand. The patterns reflect internal states that my people usually keep private, they said softly, their harmonics shifting to a lower register. But you've learned to read them, haven't you? Some of them, Elena admitted, finally letting her hand drop. The blues of scientific discovery, the greens of satisfaction, the violet of... She trailed off, realizing she'd never quite figured out what that deep violet meant. It appeared most often when Kythera looked at her. The violet is complexity, Kythera said, their voice carrying new harmonics that made Elena's skin tingle. It appears when we experience emotions that have no simple translation. They moved closer, their tall frame casting Elena in shadow. Like now, the quantum containment field hummed louder, drawing their attention back to the experiment. The DNA strands had formed a new configuration, the seventh strand weaving through human genetic material in ways that made Elena's scientific mind reel with possibilities. Kythera, she breathed, are you seeing this? The quantum entanglement is complete. The strands aren't just communicating anymore, they're becoming something new, Kythera finished, their scales blazing with colors Elena had never seen before, something neither human nor luminary. They manipulated the controls, bringing up additional data streams. The genetic harmony is perfect. Elena's fingers flew over her console, recording every aspect of the unprecedented merger. This goes beyond anything we imagined. The implications for both our species. She paused as she felt Kythera's hand rest gently on her shoulder, that touch sending waves of warmth through her body. Elena, Kythera's voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with her very cells. I don't believe this is merely scientific discovery anymore. The seventh strand doesn't just respond to your presence, it seeks it. And my patterns, their bioluminescence pulsed with that deep violet again. They've never responded to anyone the way they respond to you. The air between them seemed charged with possibility, both scientific and personal. Elena found herself reaching out again, this time letting her fingers make contact with Kythera's luminescent skin. The sensation was like touching living silk, warm and vibrant with an energy she couldn't name. We're breaking every protocol, she whispered, but didn't pull away. The Oversight Committee, your Council of Elders. Perhaps some protocols need to be broken, Kythera responded, their scales shimmering with new patterns that seemed to reach out to Elena's touch. For the sake of understanding something greater than ourselves. As they stood there, connected by touch and surrounded by the evidence of their breakthrough, neither of them noticed the subtle changes beginning in the quantum field around them. The seventh strand's song had moved beyond their containment, reaching out to the two beings who had dared to bridge the gap between their species. The true implications of their discovery were about to become far more personal than either of them had imagined. 2 weeks after their late-night breakthrough, Elena knew something was different about Kythera. The luminary ambassador's normally fluid movements had become hesitant, their bioluminescent patterns fluctuating in ways she'd never seen before. Most concerning were the moments when their scales would pulse with colors that seemed to mirror human biological rhythms, something that should have been impossible. Your quantum readings are unusually elevated, Elena said one evening, trying to keep her voice steady as she studied Kythera's medical scan. And these cellular changes, she trailed off, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Kythera stood before the scanning equipment, their tall frame seeming somehow more vulnerable than usual. The seventh strand, they said, their harmonics carrying an undertone of what might have been fear. It's no longer just communicating with human DNA. It's... They paused, their scales rippling with colors Elena had no names for. Adapting, Elena finished, her heart racing as she analyzed the data. Kythera, your genetic structure is showing signs of human DNA integration, but that's not possible. Our containment fields were perfect, unless... She remembered that night 2 weeks ago, the moment their hands had touched amid the swirling strands of quantum-shifted DNA. Unless the containment was never meant to hold against true genetic harmony, Cathara said softly, their multifaceted eyes fixed on Elena. You feel it too, don't you? The changes. Elena wanted to deny it, but she couldn't ignore the evidence anymore. The strange dreams filled with colors she shouldn't be able to see, the way her skin sometimes seemed to shimmer in darkened rooms, the inexplicable awareness of Cathara's presence even through walls. We need to run a full spectrum analysis, she said, already moving to the testing station. The results appeared in the air between them, a holographic testament to the impossible. Elena's DNA had begun exhibiting quantum properties, while Cathara's genetic structure showed unmistakable signs of human integration. But it was the new formation taking shape within Cathara's body that made both of them fall silent. Elena, Cathara's voice carried harmonics she'd never heard before. I believe I am carrying something that has never existed in the history of either of our species. Their scales pulsed with a mixture of fear and wonder. A hybrid, a child. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Elena's scientific training warred with the impossible reality before her. But we only touched. How could? The seventh strand, Cathara explained, their bioluminescence creating complex patterns that seemed to dance with emotion. It doesn't just facilitate communication between species, it seeks harmony at the deepest level. Our research opened a door, and our connection. They reached out, their luminescent hand hovering near Elena's face. Our connection provided the catalyst. Elena caught their hand, noting how her own skin seemed to glow faintly at the point of contact. The committee will want to quarantine us, she said, her mind racing through scenarios. The Council of Elders will either see this as the fulfillment of ancient prophecies or an abomination. Cathara finished, their scales shifting to colors of determination. But they cannot deny what has happened here. We have achieved something that transcends both science and spiritual tradition. Elena stepped closer, placing her free hand against Cathara's abdomen where the impossible life was growing. She gasped as she felt a response, not physical, but a quantum resonance that seemed to sing through her modified cells. It's beautiful, she whispered, watching patterns of light dance beneath Cathara's scales where she touched them. It is frightening, Cathara admitted, the harmonics carrying both joy and uncertainty. I am becoming something new, Elena. We both are. And this child. Their scales rippled with protective colors. It will be the first of its kind. Neither human nor luminary, but something more. The lab's quantum sensors suddenly came alive, registering the energy flowing between them. Elena watched in amazement as her own skin began to glow faintly, responding to Cathara's bioluminescence. Their research had done more than bridge the gap between species. It had created a new path forward, written in the language of DNA. We need to protect it, Elena said firmly, her scientific caution giving way to something deeper, more primal. Both the discovery and, she paused, realizing the weight of what she was about to say, our child. Cathara's scales blazed with that deep violet she'd come to associate with their most complex emotions. Then we must be prepared for what comes next, they said, their free hand moving to cover Elena's where it rested against their abdomen, because once this becomes known, everything will change. As they stood there, connected by touch and the impossible life growing between them, Elena realized they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. They had broken the barriers between species not just in a lab, but in a way that would reshape the future of both their peoples. And somewhere in the quantum space between their joined hands, a new consciousness stirred, carrying within it the potential to unite worlds. The news broke like a quantum cascade. Within hours of their official report to both the Oversight Committee and the Council of Elders, Stellar Labs found itself at the center of a galactic storm. Security barriers hummed around the facility's perimeter as reporters from every known sentient species gathered outside, their transmission devices creating a sea of floating lights in the pre-dawn darkness. Elena watched them from her laboratory window, one hand absently touching her own skin where a faint luminescence had begun to manifest. Behind her, Cathara's reflection shimmered in the glass, their normally brilliant scales muted with concern. "The council's representatives will arrive within the hour," Cathara said, their harmonics carrying undertones of anxiety. "They've already declared this situation a crisis of harmony." Their tall frame moved closer to Elena, protective colors rippling across their scales. Such declarations have historically preceded attempts to contain situations deemed threatening to our spiritual order. Elena turned from the window, her modified cells sensing Cathara's distress even before she saw their patterns. "They can't contain this," she said firmly. "What's happening between us, what we've created?" She gestured to the latest scan results floating in the air between them. "It's beyond anything either of our species has imagined." The holographic display showed their child's developing DNA structure, a perfect fusion of human and luminary genetics, the seventh strand weaving through it like a golden thread. But it was more than just a hybrid. The quantum readings suggested consciousness on a level that defied conventional understanding. "The human scientists are equally alarmed," Elena continued, bringing up another display showing urgent messages from various research institutions. "They're calling it everything from a breakthrough in xenogenetics to a potential biological security threat." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice, as if love could be a threat. Cathara's scales flickered with surprise at the word love, then settled into the deep violet that Elena now knew meant profound emotional connection. "Perhaps that is exactly what frightens them," they said softly. "Not the genetics, not the quantum harmonies, but the proof that barriers between species are more permeable than anyone believed." A chime from the lab's communication system interrupted them. "Dr. Santos," her assistant's voice was tense, "the Oversight Committee has convened an emergency session. They're demanding your immediate presence, both of you." Elena squared her shoulders, feeling the subtle pulse of quantum energy between herself and Cathara strengthen with their shared resolve. "Tell them we're on our way." She turned to Cathara, reaching up to touch their luminescent face. "Whatever happens in there, we face it together." The committee chamber was packed with representatives from both species. Human scientists in formal wear sat alongside luminary elders, their bioluminescence creating patterns of agitation that Elena could now partially read. At the center of the chamber, a quantum-stabilized environment had been prepared for their presentation. As they entered, Elena felt the weight of every gaze, human eyes wide with scientific curiosity or fear, luminary patterns shifting between sacred horror and fascinated wonder. Cathara's hand found hers, their touch sending ripples of shared strength through their quantum-linked cells. "Dr. Elena Santos, Ambassador Cathara," the committee chair's voice echoed through the chamber. "You stand before us to address the unprecedented situation you have created." Their tone made it clear they considered this a diplomatic way of saying caused. "Please explain how this breach of protocol occurred." Elena stepped forward, her skin beginning to glow faintly under the chamber's lights. "What you call a breach of protocol," she began, her voice steady, "we called evolution. The quantum resonance between our species wasn't created in our lab. It was discovered. It's always been there, waiting for us to be ready." Cathara moved to stand beside her, their scales displaying colors of absolute conviction. "Our child is not a violation of natural law," they added, harmonics resonating through the chamber. "It is proof that the great harmony our ancestors spoke of is more than legend. It is a living possibility." Murmurs rippled through the assembled officials. A luminary elder rose, their patterns showing signs of ancient knowledge. "There are prophecies," they said slowly, "of a time when the barriers between species would dissolve, when new forms of life would emerge to guide us toward greater understanding." "Prophecies aren't peer-reviewed science," a human scientist countered, but their voice lacked conviction as they stared Elena's glowing skin and Cathara's human resonant patterns. "Perhaps," Elena suggested, activating the chamber's holographic systems to display their research data. "It's time we stop seeing science and spiritual wisdom as opposing forces." The DNA strands danced in the air, human and luminary genetics interweaving in patterns of impossible beauty. Look at what becomes possible when we do. As the chamber filled with the light of their discovery, Elena felt something else, a quantum pulse from the life growing within Cathara, reaching out to touch the consciousness of everyone present. Around them, humans gasped and luminary patterns flared with recognition as they felt it too. That, Cathara said into the stunned silence, is the voice of the future. Not just our child, but the potential that exists between all sentient species. We are not here to ask permission for what we've done. We are here to show you what's possible. The chamber erupted in voices and shifting patterns, but Elena barely heard them. She was focused on the subtle glow emanating from her own skin, the warmth of Cathara's touch, and the quantum song of their child reaching out to bridge the gap between worlds. They had started a revolution, not with weapons or politics, but with love and genetic harmony. And as the debate raged around them, Elena knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same again. The global news feeds couldn't get enough of them. Human alien Lovi Siuiatis Evio Luvlionauri Mire Sil blazed across holographic headlines worldwide. Every network wanted their story, the brilliant human scientist and the mysterious alien diplomat who had transcended species barriers through love and genetic harmony. Elena watched from Stellar Labs' newly established Xenogenetic Research Center as another wave of reporters gathered outside. 3 months had passed since their revelation to the committee, and Cathara's pregnancy had begun showing visible signs that fascinated both species. Their normally sleek form now curved gracefully, their scales shifting with patterns that somehow combined human biological rhythms with luminary bioluminescence. The latest scans are remarkable, Elena said, studying the quantum-enhanced images floating before them. The child's neural patterns. I've never seen anything like this level of complexity. Her own skin glowed softly as she reached out to touch the hologram, her modified cells resonating with the data. Cathara moved behind her, their tall frame curving protectively around Elena. The Council of Elders has begun referring to our child as the first song. They said, their harmonics carrying notes of pride and wonder. They believe the prophecies are being fulfilled in ways none of us could have imagined. The holographic display shifted to show their child's developing consciousness, a quantum web of human neurons intertwined with luminary energy patterns. Even at this early stage, the hybrid mind showed signs of capabilities that exceeded both parent species. The genetic integration is perfect, Elena marveled, her scientific mind still struggling to comprehend the elegance of what they created. But it's more than that. Look at these quantum resonance patterns. They're not just combining our species' traits, they're transcending them entirely. A soft chime interrupted their observation. Dr. Santos, Ambassador Cathara, her assistant's voice came through the comm system. The first group of volunteer couples has arrived. Since their story had gone public, hundreds of human luminary couples had come forward, revealing relationships that had been kept secret for fear of societal rejection. Now, with official support from both governments, Stellar Labs had begun a program to help other pairs achieve genetic harmony. Send them in, Elena said, feeling Cathara's scales ripple with approval. As the laboratory doors opened, 5 couples entered, humans of various ethnicities alongside their luminary partners, all watching Elena and Cathara with hope in their eyes and patterns. Welcome. Cathara's harmonics filled the room with warmth. You are about to embark on a journey that will change not only your lives, but the future of both our species. Their scales shifted to display patterns of encouragement that Elena had learned to create subtle echoes of in her own modified skin. A young human woman stepped forward, her hand intertwined with her luminary partner's. Will it hurt? She asked, looking at Cathara's pregnant form with a mixture of fear and longing. Elena smiled, remembering her own transformation. The process of genetic harmony isn't painful, she explained, bringing up displays of the modified quantum chamber they developed. It's more like learning to sing a new song with every cell in your body. The seventh strand knows what to do, Cathara added, their free hand resting on their swollen abdomen. It has always known. We simply had to learn how to listen. Their scales rippled with colors of joy as they felt their child respond to the presence of the new couples. As Elena began explaining the procedure, she noticed something extraordinary. The quantum field in the lab was responding to the gathered couples, creating subtle harmonies between their genetic patterns even before the official process began. Love, it seemed, had already started building bridges at the molecular level. Your bodies are already reaching for each other, she said, showing them the readings. The quantum resonance patterns show pre-existing harmony. All we're doing is giving it permission to grow stronger. One of the luminary visitors' patterns shifted to show recognition. The ancient texts speak of this, the drawing together, when souls meant to join would create songs across the void between species. Perhaps, Cathara suggested, that harmonics carrying a note of gentle amusement. Your ancestors understood more about quantum genetics than we gave them credit for. As Elena guided the first couple into the modified chamber, she felt the familiar surge of quantum energy, her cells singing in harmony with Cathara's, their child's consciousness reaching out to touch the new patterns forming before them. This was more than science now, more than breaking genetic barriers. This was the beginning of a new chapter in the story of sentient life. Remember, she told the nervous couple, don't fight the changes. Let your bodies learn each other's songs. The seventh strand will do the rest. Around them, the quantum field hummed with possibility as two more species began their journey toward harmony. Outside, the sun rose over Los Angeles, its light catching the shimmer of Elena's modified skin and Cathara's iridescent scales, living proof that love could transcend not just cultural boundaries, but the very barriers of biology itself. Their child moved within Cathara, its quantum song growing stronger by the day. Soon it would join a world that was already changing, already learning to sing new songs of unity and possibility. Elena and Cathara had done more than create a new form of life. They had shown the galaxy that evolution itself could be guided by love. And this was only the beginning. The birthing chamber in Stellar Labs pulsed with quantum energy, its walls alive with swirling patterns of light that mimicked both human DNA helixes and luminary genetic songs. Elena stood beside Cathara, their joined hands creating cascades of bioluminescence that rippled through the air. After 9 months of anticipation, their child was about to make history. The quantum field harmonics are perfect, Dr. Zhang, their chief medical officer, announced. Her own skin showed traces of luminescence. Like many humans working closely with luminary partners, she had begun developing subtle genetic changes. The child is ready. Cathara's scales blazed with colors of both pain and joy as the birthing process began. Elena felt every sensation through their quantum link, their shared consciousness making them truly one in this moment. Around them, human medical equipment worked in concert with luminary healing harmonics. Two technologies merged just as their species had begun to merge. I can feel the song, Cathara whispered, their harmonics trembling with emotion. It's stronger than anything in our histories. The quantum field suddenly pulsed with unprecedented power. Monitors sparked with excess energy as a new consciousness made its presence known. Through the windows, observers from both species watched in awe as patterns of light danced across the Los Angeles skyline, the child's first communication reaching far beyond the confines of the lab. Then, with a final surge of energy that temporarily disrupted every quantum device in the building, that child entered the world. By all the harmonies, Dr. Zhang breathed, her professional composure cracking as she held the infant. Look at them. The child was beautiful in ways that defied conventional description. Their skin shifted between human tones and luminary bioluminescence, creating patterns never before seen in either species. Delicate scales that seemed to be made of living crystal caught the light, refracting it into impossible colors. But it was their eyes that truly captured attention. Multifaceted like Cathara's, but with Elena's warm brown color, they seemed to hold galaxies within them. As Dr. Zhang placed the child in Cathara's arms, Elena felt their shared joy cascade through their quantum link. The baby reached up with tiny fingers that sparkled with genetic potential, touching first Cathara's scales, then Elena's luminescent skin. Where they touched, new patterns formed, a family connected not just by love, but by the very fabric of evolution itself. Aurora, Elena said softly, the name they'd chosen seeming perfect for a being who bridged dawn and dusk, earth and stars, human and luminary. Our morning light. Cathara's harmonics carried tones of pure love as they added the luminary name they'd selected, Jirayan, Song of New Beginnings. Aurora/Jirayan opened their eyes fully, and every quantum-sensitive being in the building felt their consciousness reach out. Images flooded through their shared awareness, visions of a future where the boundaries between species dissolved, where genetic harmony created forms of life as numerous as the stars themselves. Their child wasn't just a hybrid, they were a gateway to possibilities that neither species had imagined. Within days, Aurora's birth had transformed the global conversation about human luminary relations. The fear and skepticism that had initially greeted Elena and Cathara's relationship gave way to wonder as their child demonstrated abilities that transcended both species' limitations. By 6 months, Aurora could manipulate quantum fields instinctively, creating bridges of understanding between different forms of consciousness. 1 year after Aurora's birth, Elena stood at a podium before the United Galactic Council, Cathara at her side and their child floating slightly above the ground between them, already defying conventional physics. What we discovered in that lab wasn't just a new form of life, Elena told the assembled representatives of 100 species. It was proof that evolution itself is driven not just by survival, but by love. By the desire to reach across the void between stars and species to create something new. Cathara's harmonics carried through the chamber as they added. The prophecies spoke of a time when the barriers would fall, when life would find new songs to sing. That time is now. Aurora raised their small hands, and the quantum field of the chamber came alive with possibilities. Every being present felt their consciousness touched by the child's gift, the ability to see beyond physical forms to the underlying harmony that connected all life. As Elena watched their child share their vision of unity with the galaxy's leaders, she remembered that first moment in the lab when she'd seen the 7th strand reach out to human DNA. She and Cathara had done more than break scientific barriers or fulfill ancient prophecies. They had proven that love could literally change the structure of the universe, one quantum connection at a time. Aurora turned to them, their impossible eyes filled with both wisdom and innocence, and sang a harmony that contained notes of both Earth and distant stars. Around them, representatives of 100 worlds felt their own genetic songs begin to shift, reaching for new possibilities. The age of isolation was over. The time of harmony had begun. And somewhere in the quantum space between worlds, new songs were waiting to be sung.